In front of the whole family, her kid gave her a cheek smack. Widow and retired teacher Ruth Langley did not weep. Her only kid and formerly dependable heir, Jordan, chuckled and grabbed for more wine. His name would disappear by morning from her will, her action, and all of the accounts he had previously had unrestricted access to. She had been his mother all her life. She was now in charge of herself, and the records would speak for her when he arrived for what he believed he was due. I must ask, though, where are you viewing from before we continue? Don't forget to subscribe and leave a comment. Steam rose in soft spirals as the knife cut through the breast cleanly. Ruth used the linen towel, which was embroidered with small pumpkins, to wipe her hands and folded it neatly next to the tray. She turned to face the table. Excellent. Glazed sweet potatoes with a shimmering cranberry sauce. Under candlelight, her mother's silver, polished and shining. 11 place settings. There were 4 generations in all. The door slammed. Ruth remained still. The footsteps were familiar to her. Jordan was heavy and impatient. He entered without saying hello. Kara, following closely behind, her lips pursed, her makeup hardly concealing the stress. With their coats half off, his 2 lads crept inside and grabbed their iPads right away. The small ceramic turkey Ruth had purchased at a church fundraiser in 1993 was knocked over as Jordan threw his keys onto the foyer table. Ruth responded softly, without accusation, "You're late." "I was becoming concerned," she continued. Jordan laughed. "We promised to arrive as soon as possible." Traffic. Kara stepped over to give Ruth a rigid embrace. Without looking at her, she said, "It smells good." Ruth nodded, not knowing which was more genuine at the time, the coldness or the flattery. Everyone was seated by 3:08 p.m. At the head of the table, Ruth took her place. Jordan looked at his phone across from her. She cleared her throat. "I simply wanted to express my gratitude for your presence. I understand that it's not always simple, but—" Jordan didn't raise his head. "Can we eat instead of listening to the monologue? In fact, some of us have plans for later." The guests experienced a wave of unease. Ruth looked down at the turkey she had painstakingly cut, then at the kids, then at her elderly neighbor. Although it didn't reach her eyes, she grinned. "All I want is for us to eat together without anyone being rude." It only required that. Jordan violently pulled back his chair, causing the legs to shriek on the ground. "Unkind," he spat. "Are you saying that I'm rude in front of everyone? Are you joking?" Kara gasped, attempting to hold onto his arm. "Jordan." He pulled it out. "I arrive. Even with my family around, I still don't measure up. Everything is ruined by you. Each and every year." Ruth replied softly, "Please speak more quietly." He didn't. "You never grow up," he yelled, "playing the victim all the time. At the table, you always act like the saint." "I'm not pretending," Ruth answered. "And I'm not getting louder." Then he got up and moved in her direction. Everybody froze. He gave her a smack. Like a fallen dish, the boom shattered the room. Sharp but not loud, Ruth sidestepped into her seat. There was a gasp. One of the kids burst into tears. Kara said, "Jesus, Jordan," but she remained still. Ruth softly pressed her fingers to her cheek and straightened herself. He'd only no blood. Her eyes remained dry. She gave him a serious look. Good night to the face she once kissed. She rocked the infant to sleep. She defended the adolescent before school officials. Now she could see the man well. She murmured, "Thank you," in a quiet but distinct voice, for being so clear about everything. Jordan blinked, taken aback by her composure. He murmured, "You're crazy," and turned to go. Ruth remained silent. Gently, she scooped some mashed potatoes onto her dish with a serving spoon. The room didn't move. Nobody knew how to respond. Ruth nibbled a little. Chewed. "Delicious," she said softly. In pieces, the night came to an end. Kara hurried the children away. Some visitors stayed, uncertain whether to provide consolation or to flee. Ruth gave them all a grin and assured them not to worry or forget about the pie. Her hands were steady as she packaged leftovers and distributed them like communion. Ruth was standing in the kitchen by herself, wearing a dish towel and a bruise she hadn't earned, when the final door closed and the room was silent again. She examined the ripped and hollowed-out turkey carcass. After that, she went to her desk, took a seat, and wrote one phrase on a notepad. Give Vanessa a call right away. The next morning, she picked up the phone and said, I'm ready to change my entire will. The morning sun filtered through the kitchen blinds in thin golden stripes. Ruth stood at the sink, gently dabbing the side of her face with a cold spoon. The swelling had gone down, but the bruise bloomed deep beneath her right cheekbone. An ugly smear of purple, edged with yellow, the kind you could pretend was nothing if you didn't know what had caused it. She didn't cry. She hadn't cried once. But as she stared into the bathroom mirror, brush in one hand, concealer in the other, she realized this was the first time she'd ever covered up something someone else had put on her. Not a wrinkle, not a scar or bruise. Her phone buzzed on the counter. Kara, he didn't mean it. Please don't escalate. Ruth stared at the message. No greeting, no question, no remorse. Her thumbs moved with surprising speed. I won't escalate. I'll exit. She hit send and immediately turned on voice memos. Her voice was calm, professional. November 24th, 7:13 a.m. Photographing right side facial contusion. Incident occurred approximately 3:11 p.m. yesterday. Witnesses present. She took the photo, then took another, logged the time in her planner, scrolled through her missed calls. One from Jordan, none from Kara. She tapped the voicemail icon and saved his message into a locked folder. You always take things too far. You pushed me. You know that. She renamed the file justification.mp3. By 8 a.m., Lydia's blue sedan pulled up to the curb. Ruth opened the door before she could knock. Breakfast? Lydia asked gently, eyes scanning Ruth's face. She didn't react to the bruise, didn't pretend not to see it, just waited. Ruth nodded and grabbed her coat. They sat in a quiet booth at a corner cafe. Eggs, toast, lukewarm coffee. Neither of them drank. Ruth stirred hers, the spoon tapping against ceramic like a slow metronome. Lydia finally asked, Want to talk about it? Ruth didn't look up. It wasn't a slap. Lydia blinked. Ruth continued. It was how natural it felt to him, as if he'd been waiting for a reason. Lydia didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her hand reached across the table and gently rested on Ruth's. Ruth exhaled through her nose and shook her head. I think I'm finally done playing the but he's my son game. They ate in silence. Ruth didn't touch her toast. Back at the house, Ruth pulled the fireproof box from the back of the hall closet. The combination lock clicked like a tiny warning shot. Inside, folders labeled deed, will, Jordan's education, life policy. She laid each document on the dining table, the same table where the cranberry sauce had congealed under candlelight just the day before. She pulled a highlighter from the junk drawer and drew a thick yellow line through his name wherever it appeared. The doorbell rang, but Ruth didn't answer it. She was already back at her desk, typing to Vanessa Green, estate attorney. Subject, urgent revision request. Vanessa, I'm ready to move forward with a full estate overhaul. Jordan is no longer to be named on any documents, past, present, or future. Please advise next steps. I'm available anytime. Ruth Langford. She pressed send, then shut the laptop and stared out the window. Outside, the wind had picked up. Leaves scattered. Winter was waiting. So was Justice. Her phone chimed 10 minutes later. Vanessa, let's meet in person. This won't be simple, but it will be final. Ruth turned away from the window. The bruise on her cheek ached against the pull of her skin as she smiled, just barely. The next day, she met Vanessa. The legal pad sat in front of her like a confession. Her name was printed at the top in Vanessa's tidy script, followed by a heading that made Ruth's stomach clench slightly despite herself. Current testamentary structure, Ruth Langford. Below it, a neat column, executor, Jordan Langford. Primary beneficiary, Jordan Langford. Contingent beneficiaries, none. Vanessa adjusted her glasses and looked up. This is the version from 2017. Is this still accurate? Ruth stared at the words, her name, his name, stacked as if connected. No, she said. Not even close. Vanessa leaned back slightly, watching her carefully. Tell me what you're thinking. Ruth didn't hesitate. I want to start over completely. He gets nothing. Not the house, not the policy, not a chair leg. Vanessa's brows lifted, but not in judgment. In solidarity. All right, she said. We'll restructure everything, but I want to walk you through what that means legally. Ruth nodded. Her hands were folded calmly in her lap, but her foot tapped under the table, betraying the charge running through her. Vanessa continued, "We'll need a staggered disinheritance strategy, clean, specific, and immune to contest. The more airtight we make it, the less likely he'll even try." Ruth said nothing for a moment. Then, slowly, include a condition. Vanessa clicked her pen. "What kind of condition?" Ruth exhaled. "That any instance of physical aggression, past or future, voids all rights permanently. No reinstatement." Vanessa paused. "That's strong, but you'll need proof. Do you have any witnesses?" Ruth smiled for the first time that morning. It was dry, almost amused. 13, she said. "They all stayed for pie." Vanessa blinked. "Seriously? He slapped me at Thanksgiving. Full house." Vanessa straightened her posture. "In that case, we'll add a behavior-based disqualifier. We'll also include a protection clause. If he tries to use emotional distress or mental manipulation to argue for guardianship later, it's automatically void." Ruth looked out the window. A crow landed on the railing outside, its head tilted, black eyes blinking against the morning sun. "Make Lydia the executor," she said. "She's seen everything." Vanessa nodded, already making notes. The old will lay open beside them, its pages yellowed at the edges. Ruth ran her fingers down the margin of Jordan's name, as if erasing it by touch. "I remember writing this after my husband died," she said quietly. "I thought Jordan would protect me if I ever couldn't protect myself." Vanessa glanced up. "You're protecting yourself now." Ruth smiled again. This one reached her eyes. "Yes," she said. "I am." By the time they finished, the new structure was drafted in pencil across 3 fresh pages. Vanessa tapped her nails against the table once, then looked at Ruth. "This will take a week to finalize. Notarization, filings, and I'll prepare a digital version with a video affidavit. We'll need you to come back for that." Ruth nodded. "I'll bring my own lipstick next time." They both chuckled. Vanessa stood and extended her hand. "This won't be easy. He'll push back." "I'm counting on it," Ruth said. "Let him try." That evening, Ruth sat at her desk, the soft glow of her reading lamp warming the corner of the room. Her new will drafts were tucked into a folder labeled Control, Do Not Share. She was about to log off her email when the screen blinked. A new message. Subject line, "Checking in from Jordan. Mom, Kara and I are a little worried about you. Can we come by to talk?" Ruth stared at it for a long time. Then she smiled. He felt it shifting. Good. The doorbell rang at 6:47 p.m. sharp. Earlier than Ruth expected, she took one last breath, checked the audio recorder tucked behind a napkin in the flower arrangement on the console table, and opened the door. Jordan stood in a press shirt, arms crossed, jaw tight. Kara hovered behind him, her eyes darting between Ruth's face and the doorframe, like someone bracing for a courtroom instead of a conversation. "Come in," Ruth said with practiced softness. She moved aside, letting them pass. Her tone was calm, her spine steel. They settled in the living room. Kara perched on the edge of the armchair. Jordan remained standing, his posture somewhere between casual and coiled. Ruth offered tea. No one accepted. Jordan broke the silence. "We just wanted to clear the air." Ruth nodded once. "Of course." Kara leaned forward, voice low and preemptive. "He's been working through some things. Stress, childhood stuff. You know that he doesn't always handle emotion well." Ruth's hands remained folded in her lap. "I see." Kara pressed on. "It wasn't about you. Not really. And we feel terrible about what happened." Jordan cut in. "You mean what she provoked?" The room stopped. Ruth blinked once, slow. "I provoked you." Jordan shrugged. "You know how you can be." Ruth didn't move. "How's that?" He shifted. "Controlling, judgmental, just, there's always something with you." "The way I spoke at the table?" she asked, voice soft as flannel. "The way I said I hope we could share one meal kindly?" Kara reached for Jordan's hand. He didn't take it. "She's twisting it," he muttered. "No," Ruth said, her voice now landing cleanly. "I'm quoting." For 32 minutes, they sat, talked, danced around accountability like it was a landmine. Jordan never used the word sorry. Never used her name. He kept saying you, like she was a problem to fix rather than a person to face. Ruth nodded at all the right times. Asked nothing. Argued nothing. At one point, she stood and returned with pie. Pumpkin, lightly spiced. A touch of cinnamon. "You always liked this," she said as she served them each a slice. Jordan didn't touch it. Kara, too. One bite. Then she set her fork down. When they left, Ruth stood at the door until their taillights disappeared. Then she locked it. She returned to the living room, lifted the napkin from the console, and stopped the recorder. The tiny red light flickered off. Back in her office, she plugged it into her laptop and saved the file as Langford Visit, recorded November 25th. She attached the file in an email to Vanessa Green. Subject: Recorded conversation, Jordan and Kara. Vanessa, attached is the full audio from their visit, timestamped and uninterrupted. As you'll hear, no admission, no apology, but plenty of entitlement. I believe this confirms the behavioral clause and supports immediate next steps regarding the property. Ruth. It was nearly midnight when Vanessa replied. Subject: Confirmed. I'm initiating the estate transfer for the house first thing in the morning. Jordan will be fully removed as successor deed holder. Ruth sat back, reading it twice. Outside, wind rustled through the pine trees. In her bedroom, the smell of cinnamon still lingered on the pie plate by the window. She didn't feel triumphant. She felt clear. The document slid across Vanessa's desk like a final chess piece. Ruth didn't blink. Her name, Ruth Evelyn Langford, stood firm at the bottom in fresh blue ink, a signature more precise than emotional. Vanessa stapled the final page and handed over a pristine copy. Effective immediately, your house is held under the Langford Irrevocable Living Trust. Successor, Lydia Farrow. Jordan Langford has no legal claim, interest, or future designation, revocable or otherwise. Ruth took the folder gently, like a delicate artifact. It's done, she asked. Vanessa nodded. It's done. Outside, the December wind bit her cheeks as she walked to her car. She didn't rush. The trust papers were tucked inside her leather bag, sealed with a brass clasp. When she arrived home, she turned on the fireplace and brewed a cup of black tea sweetened with honey. The mug warmed her palms as she walked into her study and opened the envelope marked from Vanessa Green. Estate notice of revised testamentary intent. Ruth removed the single-page letter, printed on elegant letterhead. It was brief, clean, and powerful. This letter confirms the full and immediate revision of the last will and testament of Ruth Evelyn Langford. Jordan Langford has been removed as beneficiary and successor of all real property, financial assets, and policy disbursements, effective December 1st, 2023. She printed a second copy. Then she framed it. She hung it beside the family portrait from 1998, the one with Jordan as a teenager, arms slung across her shoulders like a prince, unaware his crown was borrowed. The next morning, Jordan called the credit union that had always handled her affairs. He wanted to check on the joint access to Ruth's savings account, the one she'd once opened with him listed as a co-signer in case of emergencies. They told him access had been formally revoked. He tried to verify his identity. Security questions failed. He got locked out of the online portal. He called her phone. No answer. He called again. Ruth listened to the voicemails while slicing apples. Mom, this is crazy. I just need to talk. This isn't how families operate. You're being emotional. We both said things we regret. Kara's freaking out about the mortgage. Call me back. She saved them to a folder labeled Justification Audio. Then she called her accountant. The Langford Family Grant Foundation had operated quietly since Ruth's husband passed. Every year, Jordan had received $12,000 to support his entrepreneurial work, a grant with no oversight that was supposed to encourage legacy innovation. Ruth never asked how the money was used. She just hoped it kept him tethered to something. Now she knew better. Redirect all disbursements, she told her advisor. Kara and Jordan are no longer affiliated with the fund. To where, Miss Langford? Split it, she said. Between the Adult Women's Reentry Scholarship at Northeastern and the hospice training grant I spoke to Lydia about. The advisor paused, then said softly, That's a powerful shift. It's not revenge, Ruth said. It's repair. 3 days later, her doorbell rang. Ruth watched through the peephole as a man in khakis approached her porch. Courier. She opened the door. He handed her a slim white envelope sealed with care. Return address, Vanessa Green, attorney at law. Inside was the hard copy of the framed letter, plus a smaller sealed note. We filed the trust with the county. Your house is legally firewalled. No contest clause active. Ruth filed it beneath her deed. Then she made herself a lunch of turkey sandwich, leftover stuffing, and cranberry relish. The same ingredients from the day he hit her. This time, served cold, just like her resolve. Later that night, her laptop dinged. New email from Cara Langford. Subject: Please, Ruth. I know things got bad. Jordan has been spiraling. We didn't think you'd actually go this far. We might lose our house. Can we talk? Please don't cut us out completely. Cara. Ruth stared at the screen, then closed the laptop. Ruth didn't respond to Cara's email. She didn't need to. Some messages deserved only a quiet closing of a screen, the way you'd shut a book you already knew the ending to. Instead, she pulled on her wool coat, the one with the fraying cuff and pearl buttons, and headed to her financial advisor's office. The cold air stung her lungs, but the ache wasn't unwelcome. It kept her alert, awake, alive. I'd like to reassign my Roth IRA beneficiary, she said as soon as she sat across from Tom Greer, her advisor of 12 years. Tom looked up from his monitor, eyebrows raised. From Jordan. Ruth nodded. To Dana Perriner, Lydia's daughter. Tom leaned back slightly, blinking. The hospice nurse? She was there when Lydia lost her mother. She helped me understand what it means to stay beside someone without trying to control them. He said nothing for a beat, then tapped at the keyboard. You want her as sole beneficiary? No, Ruth said. I want her as successor. Lydia first, Dana second, but neither one will ever slap me at a dinner table. The meeting lasted 42 minutes. They combed through every account. Savings, brokerage, long-term CDs. Jordan's name was pulled from each one. Where his initials had once been scrawled on old forms, Ruth now added a clause, standardized and notarized for every financial document going forward. No legal contest permitted, one strike, disinheritance policy active. She repeated the line out loud once, letting the sound settle in the air between them like an oath. Tom offered her a water. She declined. That night, Ruth sat in front of her laptop in her den, framed by the low hum of the fireplace. She opened a window for better light and brushed her hair behind one ear, then clicked into the platform Vanessa had set up, a secure portal with a digital notary. She read the script slowly, but when it came time to speak, she veered from it. My name is Ruth Evelyn Langford. This is my final video, Will. Her voice was even, not dramatic, just clear. If you're watching this, it means I've passed. And this is not a moment of grief. It's a moment of instruction. She explained the structure, the named successors, the funding allocations. No tears. At the end, she looked directly at the camera. He struck me, so I struck the line with his name. She pressed stop. The video auto-uploaded, time-stamped and encrypted. A ping confirmed her submission. She closed the tab, then walked into the kitchen and poured herself a glass of white wine. It wasn't celebration. It was calibration. The doorbell rang. She checked the peephole, half expecting Cara, but instead it was a courier in a cobalt blue jacket. Delivery for Ms. Ruth Langford. She signed. The envelope was plain. No logo, but when she opened it, her stomach turned. Inside, a reference form. Employment verification. Ruth's name printed clearly on the second line. Reference provided for Jordan Langford, position, applied regional finance officer. Contact verified. Ruth E. Langford, personal character referee. She had never signed this. Never been asked. Her hands trembled for the first time in weeks, but not from fear, from a clarity so cold it burned. She picked up the phone and dialed the number listed on the form. A woman answered. Good afternoon, payroll department. Ruth's voice was calm but pointed. This is Ruth Langford. I did not authorize my name to be used as a reference for Jordan Langford. Please withdraw it immediately, and I'd like that in writing. A pause on the other end. Yes, ma'am. We'll correct the file right away. Ruth hung up. Then she sat back, wine glass untouched, and whispered to no one in particular, he's still using me. The next morning, Ruth made her call while the kettle warmed on the stove. Langley Regional Finance, the receptionist answered. This is Ruth Langford. I was listed as a personal reference for Jordan Langford without my knowledge or consent. I want my name removed immediately." There was a pause, a few clicks, and then a startled voice on the other end. "I understand. I'm sorry, Miss Langford. I'll escalate this to HR right away." "Do that," Ruth replied, her voice smooth as satin, but lined with steel. "And send me confirmation in writing. Email is fine. I expect it before noon." By 10:17 a.m. it arrived. "Dear Ms. Langford, we sincerely apologize for the miscommunication. Your reference has been formally withdrawn and your contact information purged from our files. The candidate has been notified that your support is no longer valid. Best regards, Elaine Torres, Director of Human Resources." Ruth read the email twice, not because she doubted the outcome, but because she wanted to feel every inch of that severing. Then she did something she hadn't done in months. She opened the cabinet beneath the printer and pulled out the accordion folder labeled what he used. In it were old refinance forms from 2022, the ones she had filed away without revisiting, trusting at the time that Jordan's inquiries into streamlining paperwork had been harmless. But as she looked more closely now, something stuck. On the third page of a mortgage pre-approval document, her signature appeared in blue ink, slanted, loopy, unlike her own. She narrowed her eyes, held the page to the light, compared it to a note she'd handwritten the day before. They weren't the same, not even close. Her name had been forged. She took a photo of the document and texted Vanessa directly. "Found forged signature on a refinance app. Looks like Jordan used my name without consent. Do we escalate?" A moment later, Vanessa replied, "Yes. I'm drafting a fraud alert with a soft legal advisory. Not pressing charges yet, but this locks his financial credibility. Forward everything you've got." Ruth scanned the document, added a note, and clicked send. The kettle whistled from the kitchen like a final warning. She turned off the burner, poured the water, then opened her laptop again. She changed every security question. First pet, mother's maiden name, street she grew up on. Every password became a cryptic combination of numbers and statements only she would understand. "My house, my name, my rules. Might have switched hands, 2023. Not your mother's PIN." Then came the digital legacy contacts. She removed Jordan, added Lydia, then Dana, then Vanessa. No one else. She even wiped the recovery emails from every device Jordan had once helped her set up years ago, the ones she'd left untouched out of habit. It was nearly midnight when Lydia called. "Ruth," she said breathlessly, "you need to hear this." Ruth sat up. "What's wrong?" "I checked your router settings. You'd mentioned your internet felt slower, right?" "Yes." "Well, I found a registered guest device on your network. One with a masked IP address, spoofed to look like a tablet." Ruth's heart went cold. "Was it mine?" "No," Lydia said. "It was linked to a burner Gmail. I tracked the login, and I think it's Jordan's. He's been remotely accessing your network." Ruth's chest tightened. Not with fear, but focus. "Why?" Lydia hesitated. Could be watching activity. Could be hoping to intercept account recovery emails. Could be both. Ruth didn't speak. Lydia finally added, "Want me to block it and run a full sweep?" "No," Ruth said quietly. "I want you to leave it connected just long enough for me to plant what he thinks he's stealing." At 2:17 a.m., Ruth sat cross-legged on the floor of her study, face dimly lit by the glow of an old iPad she hadn't touched in months. Lydia slept in the guest room. The house was silent except for the low hum of the printer warming in the corner. On the iPad screen, a notification popped up. Jordan Langford's iCloud account has updated. The account was still logged in. Ruth tapped through the apps, careful, methodical. His iMessage was syncing. She clicked open the archive. The first thread was with Kara. "She's acting cold again," Jordan wrote. "Did you get into the bank account?" "Not yet," Kara replied. "She's paranoid since Thanksgiving." "Well, she should be," Jordan wrote. "You slapped her in front of everyone, Jordan," Kara responded. "And they still stayed for dessert. She'll cave. Kara or die trying," Jordan wrote. "She'll be dead in a decade. We just have to smile till then." Ruth stared at the words. Cold bloomed in her chest, then vanished, replaced by a calm so sharp it felt surgical. She screenshot everything. Not just that message, but the chain before it. The mocking, the strategy, the co-conspiracy. Then she opened her encrypted email to Vanessa and attached the zip file. Subject: digital evidence, language, intent, neglect, planning. Vanessa, see attached. This confirms premeditation, manipulation, and disregard. I'd like a full digital affidavit started, and I want that last message in my file. Top page. Ruth. By sunrise, the plan was in motion. Lydia called her contact, a cybersecurity consultant named Amari, who arrived that afternoon with a rolling case and calm demeanor. Ruth offered tea. Amari accepted. They sat side by side on the dining room floor, cables snaking between outlets and ports like quiet sentinels. Amari disconnected every smart device in the house: the doorbell camera, the kitchen speaker, the thermostat, even Ruth's voice-activated reading lamp. Clean slate, Amari said. No tracking, no listening, only you. Thank you, Ruth replied. Her voice didn't shake. The security system was upgraded to a private network, not visible to any previously connected devices. A firewall was installed. Activity logging enabled. Jordan's burner email was blocked. His ghost profile erased. Any trace of his access to Ruth's internet gone. Then came the iPad. Want me to sign him out? Amari asked. No, Ruth said, holding it in both hands. I already did. She factory reset the device herself. Hand steady, gaze focused. The screen went black. When it returned, it was hers alone again. She tucked it away in her desk drawer like a cleaned weapon. Later that evening, the printer whirred to life. Ruth watched the sheet emerge. The paper was crisp. The font was clear. She'll be dead in a decade. We just have to smile till then. She clipped it to the front of her new red legal binder, the one where Vanessa kept all updated will and trust materials. Above it, on a blank white label, she wrote a single word in capital letters. Why? Then she slid the binder into her fireproof drawer. Her phone buzzed. A message from Vanessa. Got it. Full record secured. The language adds weight to both the physical and financial abuse clauses. You're building a fortress, Ruth. She replied, brick by brick. The Langford Educational Reserve had sat dormant for years, untouched since Jordan dropped out of community college and pivoted into half-hearted freelancing. Ruth opened the account summary with a slow, measured breath. $42,580.76, money she and Harold had once earmarked for their son's second chances. She'd held on to it longer than she should have, hoping, praying. But now it was funding something else entirely. She dialed the trust manager just past opening hours. I'm closing the Langford Trust, she said. Effective immediately. A beat, then a careful. And the disbursement instructions? To the Harold Langford Memorial Scholarship, created from this. Use the full amount, for which applicants, adults returning to school after domestic trauma. They'll know what to say. They always do. That same evening, Ruth reached into the fireproof safe and retrieved a thick embossed folder. The Langford Family Trust, the original with the ribbon-tied spine, and Harold's signature in navy ink on the cover page. For years, it had felt sacred. Now it just felt outdated, dangerous, even. She carried it to the dining table and lit a single taper candle. The pages crackled as she flipped them, her fingers pausing at Jordan's name again and again. Unconditional heir, one clause read. Successor to all assets, read another. She read every word. Then Rose carried the folder to the shredder and fed it through, page by page. Each sheet sounded like a verdict, not angry, not hasty, final. By the end, only one name still existed in her legal world. Hers. 3 days later, Ruth opened her front door to a woman in jeans and a fitted blazer with a compact camera bag slung over her shoulder. She introduced herself as Celine, the documentarian Vanessa had arranged. You're really okay filming this? She asked gently. I'm not here to bleed, Ruth replied. I'm here to build something. The project title had been Ruth's idea. When Suns hit, Celine set up the camera in the kitchen. Ruth didn't rehearse. She didn't dramatize. She simply recreated Thanksgiving, hands brushing olive oil over a turkey. Eyes focused on the stove as she recalled how Jordan's slap had knocked more than air out of her lungs. He didn't just hit me, she said. He erased me. So, I rewrote the entire record. She shared the bruise photo, the text with Kara, the Thanksgiving audio. Then she looked straight into the lens and said, "This isn't vengeance. It's documentation." The restraining order came next. Vanessa submitted the medical photo, the bank logs, the iPad screenshots, and the burner email tracing. Together, they formed an airtight narrative: emotional abuse, financial manipulation, physical assault, and digital surveillance. The judge barely glanced up before stamping the file. Granted, 3-state validity, no contact, 300 feet minimum. Celine returned a week later with a rough cut of the PSA. Ruth watched it alone, sitting upright on the sofa with the lights off. The footage opened on the empty dining table from that night. Her voice, low, even, played over images of the fading bruise. Then came the screenshot. "She'll be dead in a decade. We just have to smile till then." The video ended not with music, but with silence. White text on a black screen. "Every elder deserves safety, not silence." She approved it with a single word: broadcast. The National Elder Justice Foundation emailed 2 days later. Subject: PSA approved for national distribution. Ruth, your story will help more people than you can imagine. We're honored to share your voice. Team NEJF. Meanwhile, Jordan drifted in a different orbit, cut off from her accounts, her network, her name. He was still unemployed, still emailing vague requests to estranged relatives, still oblivious to how thoroughly the door had closed. Kara had stopped trying to smooth things over. Ruth hadn't heard from her in weeks. The only updates Ruth received were from her attorney, who now referred to Jordan not as your son, but as the former named party. That Thursday, just as Ruth was pouring tea, a message from Vanessa arrived. "Ruth, you've been invited to speak at the National Elder Protection Conference. They saw the PSA. They want you front and center." V. Ruth exhaled slowly, not surprise, recognition. She typed back, "I'll attend, but I'm not giving a speech. I'm giving a precedent." Ruth stood behind the podium at the National Elder Protection Conference, her voice firm, her posture unshaken as she shared her story, not with rage, but with reason. She recounted the slap that started it all, not for shock, but as a pivot point in a much larger lesson about boundaries, dignity, and legal preparedness. The room was silent, every eye fixed on her, not just as a survivor, but as a strategist. When she returned home later that evening, her heels clicking softly on the entryway tile, she didn't feel drained. She felt precise. She set her notes on the kitchen counter, poured a glass of water, and looked out the window. The house didn't just feel quiet, it felt fortified. The dining room looked the same, but nothing felt the same. Ruth placed the final fork down beside the pumpkin linen napkin and stepped back. Her hand lingered on the polished cherrywood chair that once sat Jordan. She didn't remove the chair. She left it empty on purpose. A space not forgotten, just unoccupied. It had been a full year since the last Thanksgiving. 1 year since the slap, the hush that followed, and the storm Ruth had answered with paperwork, silence and precision. The bruise on her cheek had long faded. The paperwork had not. She didn't need to rewatch the PSA. She didn't need to reread the court filings. Her peace didn't live in those. It lived in the people arriving now, arms full of warmth and pie. Lydia arrived first with a lemon tart and a laugh that filled the foyer. Next came Dana from Ruth's caregiver support group, followed by Marcus, a hospice nurse who had once held Ruth's elbow on a bad vertigo day. Last came Celine, the documentarian, holding a bottle of wine and a bound copy of When Suns Hit, the companion transcript from the PSA. Ruth greeted each one with hugs. No stiff formality, just chosen family. "I can't believe this is the same house," Marcus said, peeking into the kitchen. "It isn't," Ruth replied. "Only the bones stayed." They gathered around the table as daylight faded and candlelight warmed the corners of the room. Celine took a quiet photo from her seat. No flash, just a still frame of Ruth surrounded by those who stayed, those who never struck. As the turkey was served in plates filled with cranberry, green beans, and Lydia's questionable cornbread stuffing, Ruth stood, holding a slender envelope in her hand. She cleared her throat, not out of nerves, but to still the room. "This is for each of you," she said. "It's my will." They froze. Dana's eyes darted to Lydia, unsure if they'd misunderstood. Ruth smiled. No drama, no announcement, just clarity, because clarity she said, is a form of kindness. She passed an envelope to each guest. Inside, a simple printed letter outlining her updated estate. No legalese, just facts. Who got what, why, and what was off limits forever. The final clause was typed in bold. There is no bloodline clause, only behavior. You're in this because you showed up with care, not genetics. Silence lingered a moment longer. Then Lydia raised her glass. To starting over with boundaries. They clinked glasses. Ruth's heart beat steady. After dinner, Ruth brought out a linen-bound guest book, the same one from Thanksgiving's past, where every family member signed their name and wrote one line of gratitude each year. She flipped it open and placed it on the sideboard, a pen beside it, no instructions. One by one, her guests signed. No one asked about Jordan's page. No one mentioned the blank space from the year before. The absence said enough. Later, as she loaded the dishwasher beside Lydia and hummed an old Nat King Cole tune, her phone buzzed in the living room. She wiped her hands on a towel and checked it. A text from Kara. He still cries, but never apologizes. Ruth stared at the screen. The kettle clicked off behind her, the room otherwise silent. She didn't reply. Some messages aren't conversations. They're reminders. She walked back to the table, refilled her tea, and picked up her own envelope from the stack. Read the opening line aloud to herself like a prayer. To those I chose, not those who inherited. Ruth read the line again. To those I chose, not those who inherited, and let her finger trace the edge of the envelope one final time before placing it back on the table. The kettle had long stopped whistling. Her tea had gone cold, and still Kara's text lingered on the screen. He still cries, but never apologizes. She didn't respond. Instead, she deleted the message and powered down the phone. For the first time in months, the silence felt sacred clean. The next morning, Ruth opened a blank Word document and typed 5 words. Inheritance and abuse. A survivor's framework. She stared at them as if they belonged to someone else. But no, these were hers. Born from the bruise that had faded but never vanished. From the name that once sat at the top of every trust and now lived nowhere near her paperwork. She began writing, not as a victim, not even as a mother, but as a survivor with an agenda. The guide wasn't emotional. It was procedural. Step-by-step instructions on removing power of attorney without conflict. How to build a conditional clause into an estate plan. What counts as coercion? How to log neglect without triggering suspicion. She included lines most women would recognize too well. You'll regret this when you're older. After all I've done for you. But he's your son. Her answers were typed in bold. Aging isn't consent. Pain doesn't owe gratitude. Sonship is not a shield. By the end of the week, she had formatted, footnoted, and uploaded the document to elderjustice.org. A quiet click of submit sealed it. It was published the following Monday. The emails began within hours. One woman from Sarasota wrote, I never knew how to start. You just gave me a beginning. Another from Tacoma, he hit me too. Not with his hands, but with silence, shame, and leverage. A third, I took my name back. You gave me the words. Thank you. Ruth created a new folder on her desktop. Unsaid Sisters. She saved every message. She never replied. She didn't need to. They weren't writing to start a conversation. They were writing to finish one. Later that evening, she reopened her encrypted estate vault and selected the video file marked Final Will Statement Version. She clicked Add Epilogue. No makeup, no script, just her face, gray roots and all, square in the frame. If you're watching this, she said, it means he's still not in the room. And maybe that hurts. But maybe it also means you're surrounded by people who never lifted a hand in your direction except to steady you. Her voice didn't shake. Forgiveness is not a clause in my estate. It's a personal project, one I no longer owe anyone. She ended the video with one last line. Healing isn't a group project. She uploaded the file and logged out. The next morning, a small envelope arrived in the mail. No return address, no handwriting. Inside, a plain store-bought birthday card, no note, just blank white paper where words might have been. Ruth didn't flinch. She brought it into the kitchen, dropped it onto the counter, and poured herself a cup of fresh tea. She took her time. Only then did she shred the card. That evening, as she walked through her garden, the dusk clung like velvet, and the leaves crunched beneath her shoes. She paused beside the rosemary bush and breathed deep. She remembered when Jordan had helped her plant it, back when his hands were callous from effort, not entitlement. She no longer missed the version of him that never returned. She simply acknowledged he had left long before his name was removed. Back inside, she posted a final update to her elder justice profile. You don't need them to admit it. You just need to stop bleeding for it. Next day, Ruth received a card. She held the envelope up to the light, tilting it slightly, as if meaning might appear where words refused to. There was no handwriting, no return address, just a thin slice of glossy ivory cardstock tucked inside a plain envelope, clean, untouched, and insultingly blank. No love. No, I'm sorry. No name, just absence folded neatly. She stood in her kitchen beneath the soft hum of the range hood, the smell of baked apples still clinging to the walls from last night's cobbler. She read the inside of the card again, hoping maybe she had missed a watermark of sentiment or shame. Still blank. Ruth set the card gently on the granite counter, opened the shredder drawer and slid it through. The soft mechanical hum felt like punctuation, controlled, efficient, and final. She opened her laptop and typed quickly to Vanessa Wood, Esquire. Subject: Confirmation request, Legacy Protections. Vanessa, please confirm the no contact clause still holds. I'd also like to reconfirm its posthumous enforceability should he ever attempt to manipulate appearance after the fact. The reply came minutes later. From Vanessa Wood, subject: Reconfirmation request, Legacy Protections. Ruth confirmed. The clause holds in California, Oregon, and New York. Digital permissions removed. No posthumous contact, access, or legal appeal possible without triggering full disinheritance reversal across trusts. You're sealed. He's shut out. Vanessa. Ruth smiled, not from vindication, but from structure. She opened her social media settings next. Under Legacy Contact, she selected Remove. Under Who can see your future posts if something happens to you, she typed Chosen Family Only. She logged out without looking back. That same afternoon, a podcast producer emailed her a Zoom link. We'd love to have you join our next panel, Legal Lineage, Protecting the Aging Against Bloodline Abuse. Ruth clicked confirm, then made tea. The following week, she appeared on screen, soft gray shawl draped over her shoulders, framed by a backdrop of law books in lavender. The episode was titled You Hit. I edited. Her voice was slow, even no tremble. I didn't just change my will. I changed what it will means in families like mine. The panel of attorneys nodded silently as she explained how she'd built in recovery clauses, fraud contingencies, emotional abuse disqualifiers, and posthumous silencing measures. You don't have to forgive someone to remove them, Ruth said. You just have to outright them. The producer messaged her afterward. That last line, that's going in the promo. That evening, as twilight blurred the edge of her garden fence and the air turned lavender cool, she sat at her desk and rewatched the podcast clip, not to relive it, but to ensure every word landed the way she meant it. When the screen faded to black, she closed the browser and turned toward the wall behind her desk. On it hung her framed notice of revised testamentary intent, and beneath it, her guest book from Thanksgiving. The card never belonged here. She hadn't saved it. She hadn't scanned it. She had shredded it like a document that had failed to meet its standard of purpose. Her phone buzzed softly, an unfamiliar number, no message, just a banner preview. California State Council on Elder Advocacy nomination update. She clicked. Ruth Langley has been nominated for the state-level award in elder rights leadership. Formal confirmation pending. She blinked, then smiled. Not the kind people take pictures of, but the kind you feel in your ribs. Recognition wasn't the goal, but it was the echo she never thought she'd hear. She set her tea down and whispered aloud. Paper doesn't mean presence, and silence doesn't mean forgiveness. Then she reached for her pen, not to write back, but to write forward. The applause had died down, but Ruth still hadn't moved. Her name was stitched onto the plaque in clean serif letters. Statewide Excellence in Elder Justice. Ruth Langley. She just stepped off stage, her hands still faintly trembling, not from nerves, but from the weight of survival being recognized out loud. As she walked back to her seat, a woman in her 60s reached out and touched her forearm gently. You gave us words we didn't know we were allowed to say. Ruth smiled softly. Then say them as loud as you need. Back home, her foyer smelled like lavender wood polish and lemon oil. Lydia had freshened the house while she was gone, placing a note on the kitchen counter. You don't just deserve peace, you built it. Proud doesn't begin to cover it. Elle. Ruth exhaled deeply, setting the award beside the guest book on her dining table. The sun hit the edge of the gold plate at just the right angle, casting a warm glint onto the nearby wall where the framed notice of revised testamentary intent still hung, still untouched, still undefeated. 2 days later, Vanessa forwarded an email from a legal journal. Subject line, your case file is now a case study. The body of the message was concise. Ruth's estate journey and legal responses to familial abuse have been accepted as curriculum at 3 regional law schools. The module is titled Legacy Rewritten, Autonomy over Inheritance. No drama, no courtroom showdown, just structured decisions. Page after page of protective clauses, stitched together like a quilt. Deliberate, warm, impenetrable. That same week, Ruth was invited to lead a mentorship circle through a nonprofit law firm focused on elder advocacy. Most of the women were her age or older. Some had sons. Some didn't. All of them had stories they'd been told not to call abuse because the bruises weren't visible. Ruth began the first session the way she'd rehearsed. I'm not a lawyer. I'm a woman who decided her signature was louder than her voice. Then she showed them how to make theirs permanent, too. Vanessa met her the following Friday to finalize what they called the closure addendum. They reviewed the trust piece by piece. The new clauses included 2 community scholarships, one for women over 60 returning to education, and another for survivors of elder neglect pursuing careers in law or medicine. A medical directive fund was added, ensuring no woman in Ruth's circle would ever face silence while in pain. And finally, Ruth's favorite clause, the bloodline restriction, had been removed entirely. Anyone inheriting anything from me must demonstrate care, presence, and protection, Ruth said, voice steady. Biology doesn't entitle. Behavior does. Vanessa nodded. And Jordan, removed from all survivor access. No loopholes, not even a whisper of a right. They sat in silence a beat longer. Then Ruth pulled a slim pen from her purse. Not her usual navy blue one, but one she'd saved for this moment. Gold ink. Thick. Permanent. Chosen. She signed the final revision with a single stroke that shimmered. Vanessa sealed the document. There's nothing left for him to take. Later that evening, Ruth sat on the porch under a quiet sky, the breeze soft and unintrusive. She looked out over her garden where winter herbs were beginning to dry. Sage, rosemary, the sharp trace of time hanging in the air. She thought about what legacy had meant to her a year ago: blood, bonds, tradition. Now, Legacy was a woman in Oregon who emailed her saying, I watched your PSA. I rewrote my will. Thank you. Legacy was a second-year law student quoting Ruth's video clause in a class debate. Legacy was a hospice nurse holding her award and crying in the audience. Ruth pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders, heart steady. She hadn't disowned Jordan. She had documented him out. Inside, her printer whirred quietly. She had sent herself a fresh copy of the final trust, not because she needed it, but because it deserved to be filed with grace. She slid it into a new binder labeled in soft gold. Final, full, free. The cursor hovered over the file name, Thanksgiving Footage, 2023.mov. Ruth's fingers hesitated on the trackpad, not from fear, but from calculation. She had waited nearly a year to open the file. Vanessa had insisted she didn't need to. Lydia had offered to delete it, but Ruth had said, not yet. Now was yet. She double-clicked. The quality of the video was poor. The camera was pointed towards the dining room table and had been clipped under the archway. The music was flawless, but the visual was blurry, like an old trial movie. A child's laughter, the clink of silverware, and her voice requesting more potatoes. The tension then increased, and Kara said, not here, as Jordan's voice rose, brittle and piercing. And suddenly her body jerked on the screen. The sound of the slap was hollow and flat, like someone slapping an open palm against a table. She turned her head. She didn't yell or weep. Ruth then witnessed it in real time and on the recording. A half second, delicately curved, controlled, an unmistakable smile of her own. She took a screenshot, froze the frame, and stopped the video. After that, she turned on her printer. She went for black and white matte paper. She cut the borders of the image as it appeared and placed it in a silver frame. Simple lines and clarity, nothing fancy. She added, "The day he lost everything," beneath it in blue ink. It was the last thing any visitor would see before leaving, and the first thing she would see when she left, so she put it on the hallway shelf across from her door. Ruth clicked into her protected estate archive on her laptop that night. "Final letter, to be read only upon my death," was the title of a fresh document that was waiting. Before signing, she read it again. "To those who assumed I would remain silent, you saw my age and assumed compliance. You thought you had permission when you witnessed my affection. You described my quiet as acquiescence after seeing it. However, I never remained quiet. I was constructing. You spoke louder. I held up my signature. You struck. I took notes. You overlooked it. I made a recording. When you destroy something that cannot be repaired, I will never forgive you. However, I do relieve myself of the burden of waiting for you to speak. Your inheritance is not my legacy. It's my independence. Ruth Langley, signer." She uploaded it to the letter for closure, not contact, private trust folder after saving and encrypting it. A few weeks later, Ruth received an invitation to speak at a nearby institution in a TED-style format as part of their public policy and justice program. She had a single necklace at her throat, her hair tied back perfectly, and a blue jacket with gold cufflinks. Nothing fancy, just being there. She entered the stage slowly and methodically, as if she knew that pace wasn't reluctance. Power was the issue. When silence is a strategy, legal tools for survivors of family abuse was the title of her presentation. Without ever raising her voice, she talked clearly. She described the price of being courteous, the peril of waiting at the ideal moment, and the deception of loyalty when blood is used as leverage. Then she stopped, close to the conclusion. "Survival isn't always loud," she stated. "Sometimes it's a signature scribbled with a trembling hand that nonetheless stands up taller than the person who attacked you, and other times it's legitimate." Ruth did not bow as the hall erupted in cheers. She simply nodded before leaving the stage and into a different kind of tranquility. Back at home that evening, she made a single call and her phone lighted up once. Jordan. Just the name, no text, no voicemail, and then quiet. With a clear chest and steady breathing, she shut off her phone, blocked the number, and headed to bed. Now the drapes were never closed. Ruth's living room's hardwood flooring were bathed in sunlight as if it were meant to be there, warming the peaceful nooks and crannies that had before been dark. More than ever, the home, her dwelling, felt both stronger and gentler. A shelter, not a stronghold. It was founded on borders, not because it was replete with lineage. Photographs of ladies on the courtroom steps, scholarship recipients clutching enormous checks, and Ruth herself sitting next to a platform, mid-speech, mid-reclamation, where the sole image is on the mantel instead of family photographs. She examined grant applications from women, some with fist or inheritance bruises, in the evenings, and spent her mornings with crossword puzzles and lemon tea. She read each one. The foundation has expanded quickly. The Langley Clause Fund was called because the phrase Ruth had added to her trust, which reads, "Protection is earned, not presumed, rather than because of its riches." Each receiver possessed a face rubber. They would now have legal support. Once more, the dining table was utilized for roundtable planning with paralegals, activists, and survivors who were now scholarship givers, rather than for tense holidays. Ruth merely gave advice in the form of well-chosen phrases and well-timed pauses, and Lydia now handled the majority of the operations. Until it did not, her health remained stable and respectable. The ultimate fall wasn't spectacular. It was merely a doctor's advice that she already suspected and a subtle weariness in her bones. Ruth declined to be admitted to the hospital. She had created this existence. She would end it here. She requested that Beverly retrieve the flash drive from the safe that is fireproof. It included her ultimate will, which was videotaped, notarized, dated, sealed, and unchangeable. With the flowers in full bloom outside the window, Ruth took one more seat in her reading chair. She steadied herself by running a finger over the side table's carved edge, then gestured to Beverly to get the record. "This indicates that I died safe if you're watching. Waiting for someone who had already taken the decision to change was the worst error I did. However, I didn't remain in that error. I updated the documentation. I replaced the locks. I altered the conclusion. You don't need permission to protect yourself from rudeness. Ladies viewing this, documentation is necessary. I also hope that I've given you plenty of both. Take a moment, my son, if you ever get to view this. Never mind. You won't. My digital legacy didn't include you. Thank you to everyone who truly loved me. Take pleasure in the song. 2 days later, with a silk shawl draped softly over her shoulders, she passed away in silence. In the other room, Nat King Cole is playing quietly. Ella, Nina, Carole King, and the Supremes were on a pre-arranged playlist. There were no eulogies or funeral statements. A little framed painting in the room's corner also features Ruth's grin, immortalized in black and white with the serene, unflinching words, "The day he lost everything." With no disputed claims or legal challenges, Vanessa submitted the final estate transfer. It was policy, not pettiness, that kept Jordan in the dark. His name was not listed in the death certificate. No burial authority, no survivor clause, and no executor rights. He had been redacted rationally, not out of anger. Ruth had once been required to establish harm by the system. She had. It now demonstrated her safety. The house was never put up for sale, with a plaque outside that said, "In memory of all the women who were told to be quiet and who instead filed," it was transformed into the Langley Claus Fund's headquarters. The guest book was open inside. Its pages were filled with new names, volunteers, staff, and selected family. The vacant area that remained in the first few pages was never questioned. In the past, Ruth had thought that family was inherited. She passed away with knowledge,